Hi everyone, this is lecture 6.2. This time we'll be talking about complex groups. In talking about complex groups, we'll be discussing bureaucracy, and then we'll be talking about leadership in groups. So let's first talk about bureaucracy. Max Weber pioneered the sociological research on bureaucracies. He did not invent the bureaucracy, but he did research it rather extensively. A bureaucracy is a type of secondary group that is designed to perform tasks efficiently. When bureaucracies malfunction, they become inefficient and irritating, but they are designed to be efficient. We call this disjointedness between bureaucracies, the ideal type versus the real type. And according to Weber, all bureaucracies have 6 common traits, which may be either contribute to efficiency, i.e. the ideal type, or hinder efficiency, i.e. the real type, the way it actually happens. And in the following slides, I'm going to be listing the 6 qualities that all bureaucracies have. First, a bureaucracy is specialized. Each person working in the bureaucracy has a highly specific job, a very, very specific job. In the ideal way, this is designed so that people get very good at their jobs, right? So if you are somebody who is in charge of fixing the doors in a building, then you get really, really good at fixing those doors. In the real world, though, not only do people get good at fixing those doors, but those people get very hard to replace because maybe you installed the doors in a way that is highly individual to you, but other people then can't fix the doors. Technical competence. Jobs are filled by qualifications. So in the ideal way, this makes it easy to hire or promote new people. So if we know that we are only going to hire for a given position someone who has a master's degree, then that's going to be how it's going to be, and that weeds out a lot of people that we aren't necessarily interested in hiring. In the real world, though, what if the person cheated their way through grad school to get that master's degree? What if there is a much better candidate that doesn't actually have their master's degree, right? These are the problems led by this particular element of bureaucracy. Hierarchy. Within a bureaucracy, everyone has a boss. In the ideal setting, this makes bureaucracy efficient by you knowing who to report to, and then that person reporting to someone, and the chain of command being very clear and delineated. However, this can go wrong in the real world when bureaucracies become overly complex and one person has multiple bosses and doesn't know who to report a problem to. Interpersonality is another quality of the bureaucracy. In a bureaucracy, ideally there are no favors for friends or relatives, and this eliminates nepotism. This eliminates favoritism. This makes it so, it increases fairness in the organization. However, it can also lead in the real world to decisions that are not compassionate. So if somebody has a sick spouse, for example, and they are not able to, they've used up all their sick time, they're not able to take their time, any more time off, and there are rules specifically keeping them from taking time off. Even if an individual would grant some compassion, the bureaucracy in many cases prohibits this. And then formal written communication. So to form a paper trail, bureaucracies often make you fill out things in multiples or make you fill out online forms. In this way, the bureaucracy can figure out what went wrong in an email chain or in following the paperwork. In the real world, though, this can make the bureaucracy more inefficient by forcing people to fill out forms in situations when they could talk to people. Obviously, to update this, Weber was working in a world of purely paperwork, but this formal written communication component can also easily apply to our world of emails and online forms. Iron law of oligarchy, this is a new idea separate from Weber's qualities of bureaucracy, states an inevitable tendency for large-scale bureaucracies to become ruled undemocratically by a handful of people. So he observed that democratic purposes become subordinate to the needs of a dominant group. We see this in modern government. We see this in our own government, in the U.S. Congress, where bills are stalled, procedures are stalled to put people into appointed office toward the end of benefiting one political party or another. This is not because our government is inherently corrupt. This is because all governments, all bureaucracies, all organizations have an inherent tendency to do this kind of thing. And as a group grows, as it becomes more established, it tends to become more bureaucratic, it becomes less personal, and it becomes less human. I shouldn't say whatever. It becomes less human. Bureaucracies become their own things over time. Now let's talk about leadership. Leadership or authority, whichever you call it, depends on power. Power is our ability to control the actions of others. It includes both coercive power and influential power. Coercive power is power based by threat of force or potential harm, right? Threatening to fire you is also a form of coercive power. But when we talk about it in terms of societies, we are often talking about physical harm or military action or something like that. Influential power is supported by persuasion. Coercive power is very, very powerful. If I hold a gun to you, I can make you do almost anything. But if I remove that coercive power, if I remove that gun, you likely would never listen to me again. However, with influential power, if I can convince you that you want to do something, you may continue to do the thing that I want you to do long after I'm dead and long after I'm gone. Now, groups tend to have leaders, obviously. There are two general types of leaders. We have transformational leaders and transactional leaders. Transformational leaders instill a sense of mission or higher purpose, thus transforming the nature of the group. And obviously, different groups have different types of leaders. A social movement leader is an example of a transformational leader. Social worker is an example of transformational leader. They have some vision for what the group can do and thus taking it to that thing. Transactional leaders then are more concerned with accomplishing group tasks and group goals. These are more straightforward, less ideological individuals. This could be someone like a military leader or a police captain. Now, this isn't to say that all types of leaders can exist in all types of groups, but some groups, it makes more sense to have one kind of leader than another. Weber identified 3 types of authority found in organization. This is a real key concept to understanding leaders, especially in terms of state power or government power. Traditional authority, legal rational authority, and charismatic authority. Now, each of these is going to have their own slide coming up. Authority may be derived from multiple types, but authority is almost always in one of these 3 types, at least on the government level. Traditional authority is based on custom, birthright, or divine right. In the United States, we do not, in general, have traditional authority, and in our government, we do not have traditional authority. This is the kind of stuff of kings and royalty and that sort of thing. The traditional authority figure is a traditional authority figure because their parents were traditional authority figures, etc. So this is really kings and queens. Legal rational authority figure is authority based on laws, rules, and procedures. So the legal rational authority figure is a leader because they followed the rules. They did the paperwork. They applied to do the thing. They have a given number of years doing this given thing. Examples of legal rational authority figure include elected officials, right? They filed the paperwork, they got so many people to vote for them, and now they are the leader. Managers in a corporation are also legal rational authority figures. They worked so many years in this given position, they were promoted, they followed the rules, thus they are the authority and the leader. Owner of a business in the United States is also a legal rational authority figure. In the United States, if you purchase the business, if you purchase the things for the business, if you are listed as the owner of the business, then by the rules of our country, that is what makes you the leader. A charismatic authority figure is based on the perception of remarkable personal qualities in a leader. This is the least stable type of leadership because it is based on the individual, but it can be incredibly powerful because an individual can lead people to do things and to rise them up in that way. So examples of charismatic authority figures include people like dictators, where the regime of the country is based on the personality of that one person. Revolutionaries, similarly, they might not necessarily be heads of state, but they might lead a given social movement. That is a type of charismatic authority. And elected officials are also a type of charismatic authority. So while elected officials do follow certain rules to be those officials, they also, in a democracy, have to have a certain element of charisma to make people want to vote for them in the first place. We, if we are completely honest with the real way our democracy works, we aren't going to vote in someone who has no charisma, who's perceived as being rude, who's perceived as being ugly. We won't usually vote for that person. And if we do vote for that person, it will because they have some other special quality that makes them charismatic. Now let's talk a little more about organizations. We'll define organization as a group with an identifiable membership that engages in concerted collective actions to achieve a common purpose. And obviously, this can be any number of groups: universities, churches, armies, businesses, corporations, social work organizations. There are many types of organization. A formal organization is one that is rationally designed to achieve particular objectives by means of explicit rules, regulations, and procedures. Formal organizations have a strong tendency to be bureaucracies. And even if they don't start as bureaucracies, they eventually become bureaucracies in most instances. There are different types of formal organizations. First, you can have a utilitarian formal organization, which is one in which you join to get an expected material benefit. So a university, you enroll in a university to get your degree, get an education. Those are the benefits you get from the university. You do not join a university because you actually literally love the university. I mean, eventually you may, but the real reason you're joining is to get that education. Corporations, you join a corporation because you expect to be paid by the corporation, or you have a relationship, a financial relationship with it. A bank, you don't really create an account at a bank because you love the bank and you want to have like a romantic relationship or a friendship with the bank, do you? No, you know they're going to keep your money and they legally have to keep your money in a certain way. It's very utilitarian. Coercive. People are members of organizations because they're forced to give unquestioned obedience or authority to the organization through either life circumstances or because they've been forced to. A prison is a coercive formal organization. People who are in prisons do not generally want to be there. People who are in mental hospitals don't want to be there, but their life circumstances have forced them there. Similarly, with rehab centers, again, the person may willingly go into a rehab center, right, because they acknowledge they have a problem, but because of the nature of addiction, many people who are in rehab centers are physically being kept there until they can get better. Normative formal organizations. These are organizations in which we pursue a morally worthwhile or what we perceive to be morally worthwhile goal without expectation of material reward. And worthwhile then is defined by the group as to what worthwhile is. Examples of normative formal organizations include charities, include church groups, civil leagues, civil organizations, social movements. These can all be formal organizations which are normative. Now let's talk about a few related phenomena on the sides of this whole organization stuff. In organizations, in society, we have to be concerned with conformity and obedience. People want to conform to a group. That is part, again, of what makes us human. Now, the Solomon Asch experiment, as conducted in the mid-20th century, which was relatively controversial and could possibly be called unethical. In this experiment, individuals were put into a room, and one of those individuals was actually the subject of the study. The other individuals were pretending that they were subjects of the study. There were, I believe, somewhere around 4 individuals in the room. The person posing, the person who actually was, the experimenter said to these individuals, okay, look at this card right here with the 1 line and this card with the 3 lines. Now tell me which of these lines, A, B, or C, is as long as this line here. Now, if you look at that carefully, you look at that on your own, you see obviously that this line is the exact same length as this line. There's a little bit of an optical illusion going on there, but if you see it, if you say hold your finger up to it, it's obvious. What this found, though, was that if the other 3 people who are acting say either, well, obviously B is as long as this line, or obviously A is as long as this line, if all of them agree, then all of the actors agree, and the actors pretend convincingly, then they can often convince the person who is not pretending that C is not indeed as long as this line. That is the power of obedience and the power of conformity. In some instances, it may be that the person conforming is pretending that they agree, or it may be that the group actually convinces them to observe something that is not actually reality. Now, this is a phenomena that is of great concern when we're talking about things like military atrocity, when we're talking about things like police brutality, when we're talking about things like bad decisions that are made in an office, right? This kind of conformity is of concern in human behavior. Group cohesion is another phenomena that when we study groups, we're very interested in. Cohesion is the sense of solidarity or loyalty that groups feel toward a group to which they belong. A group is cohesive or stable when individual members feel strongly tied to the group. So we want our groups in general to be very stable, to be very strong. But group cohesion can get out of control. Too much cohesion can lead to a type of poor decision-making called groupthink. If you're familiar with Orwell's 1984, that word is actually taken from 1984 because it is a very real social phenomenon. Groupthink is the tendency for very cohesive groups to enforce a high degree of conformity among members. So this can occur in a couple ways. It could occur when people who are members of the group are afraid of the leader and afraid of being punished. So then they go along with everything the leader says and they don't question it. And then if for long enough, if everyone goes along with what the leader says, and if the leader starts to make bad decisions, then no one actually stops those decisions, those bad decisions. No one says, hey, boss, this isn't going to work. And then that can lead to disaster, hypothetically. Another way groupthink can occur is if everyone in the group is actually thinking exactly the same way. We see this in groups like in religious groups, in some political groups that start behaving in ways that we would call cultish. Those are, that is a groupthink phenomena where everyone just goes along with that. Some of the more notorious religious organizations who have done things like this, groups that have been labeled cults, have done things like commit mass suicide, for example, after too much groupthink has occurred. And there are many examples of this too. Some of the reasons why of the collective disasters that have occurred in North Korea have occurred because of groupthink, because people are afraid to challenge the political leadership within that country. And there are many instances of groupthink in human history. Okay, that is a great place to stop. We will continue these conversations, and let me know if you have any questions.